In this video, I will show you how I weave in some of my ends in my Audrey's cardigan. This is another one of those techniques where if you were to Google it, you're gonna find a ton of different methods just because there is no single right way to do it. So the techniques I'm gonna show you here are just the ones that I prefer. The key with weaving in ends is practice. The more you do it, the more confident you'll become. So there's gonna be a few places I'm gonna show you. Let's start with the underarm area. So when weaving in ends in the underarm area, if you remember when we were picking up stitches, I talked about how you shouldn't worry about any sort of gaps, looseness, that sort of thing that appear in the underarm. As you can see in mine, I have a pretty significant, loose area here and a little bit on this side as well. But we're gonna fix that all up with how we weave in the end. So first, let me put the wrong side of my sleeve facing. So I'm just going to scoot my finger through there so I can have the wrong side facing me here. And here's a nice long tail. And again, this was why when you were joining yarn for the sleeve, I'd recommended leaving a nice long tail because it comes in handy here. So I like using a tapestry needle like this. It's a little helpful that it has the bend in there, but that's not critical. So I'm going to weave my end through the tapestry needle like that. Okay, so one thing I like to do is I take my left hand, or if you're a lefty, you can take your right hand, and I sort of put it through the sleeve here so I can sort of spread things out a little bit. Let me move this up a little. So this was definitely one of the areas that was loose. So I want to pay attention to there and right here. My tail is on this side, so I'm actually going to cinch that up a little bit. So this is just how I do it. I want to reinforce the strands kind of around each of those holes. So let's start with this one. I am going to first go into this stitch. And kind of like picking up stitches, my advice usually is do what you have to do to just make it look nice. So these are just some of the methods that I do, but depending on the looseness that you might have around the underarm, it might be a little bit different. But let's go through that stitch. And then I'm going to go through this one because then that will tighten up. So you can see my finger poking through there. That will tighten up that area right there. So let's go through there. See, let's see what that did. That just nice and filled in that gap a little bit. Now there's lots of looseness up here. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to look and see, okay, well, I want this area above here. So I'm going to go into this stitch here. And then I'm going to go down on this side just so that it can then come over this way and close up that hole. So let's then go into this stitch on this side. There we go. So then that cinches up. The other thing I tend to do from time to time as I'm sort of cinching up these areas is I'll take a look and just make sure that things are looking okay and there isn't anything poking through that seems weird. So far, so good. I still have this big area here. So, okay, so now I take a look and see, okay, what would be the best next area to go through? So I'm going to go down, since my yarn is kind of going in this direction as it is, I don't want to go up because I feel like that might pull the yarn a bit. So I go in the direction of the yarn. So let's then go into this stitch here. And I really want to start tightening up this area. So I'm going to go through here and then I'm going to take my tapestry needle and go through the next one above there. And you can go into multiple stitches at a time. So let's see, we'll go through there and then let's see, actually, let me take that out and take a better look here. I'm going to go through this one and then I'm going to actually go into this bump right here. Again, I'm sort of circling this area a bit. So let me pull that through. Okay. And then I'm going to go into this bump right here. And then I'm going to go back down again, trying to cinch up here. So I'm just kind of creating a circle around those loose areas. And if you ever do one and you're like, I'm not sure if that was the right space to go into, that is totally okay. You just take it off your tapestry needle and then just sort of pull it through. So nothing you do here is not fixable. So if you didn't like what you just did, totally okay. Undo it, put it through the needle again. Okay, so I'm actually going to now, let's go into this. Do I want to go into this bump or this bump? Let's try going into this one, and then I'm going to go down. So I'm trying to cinch up this area right here, like that. And then I'm going to go into this loop here and go up to this loop. And then I'm going to go into this loop and then this one. So for this, I'm kind of retracing the stitch like that. See how it's just starting to close up a little bit? Now I still have this area, so let's see. I am going to go into this stitch here and then this stitch here. And then I'm going to retrace this stitch, which I see kind of goes under this loop, over, then under this loop. So let's go under that. And then let's go down this way. Okay, so we've done a pretty good job. I'm not seeing as much looseness. Now let me turn this over. And as you can see, it looks like I've hidden a lot of the holes. I'm not seeing a whole lot here. So I'm pretty happy with that. Now, if I saw some more lumps, I could just start undoing this and try again. This is definitely one of those techniques that practice makes perfect. I've been doing this for a while with top-down sweaters, so I've gotten pretty good at knowing where I should go into. So don't feel bad if your first attempt doesn't quite work. Just keep trying. As I said, you could always just undo what you did and then try going into some different stitches. So once I'm sort of happy with how I've cinched up those holes, usually what I do is I just start going into some of the stitches right at the underarm just to secure it a little bit, make my way over to this side. And while I'm doing that, I'll look and see if there's any other areas that I might need to cinch up. In this case, I'm pretty happy with how it's looking. So I think that'll be good. I actually don't cut the yarn right away. This is usually the first spot that I start weaving in my ends because it is the trickiest. So I try to get that over with first. But I leave a long end just in case of once I turn the whole piece right side facing, if I decide, you know what, I really wish I would have gone into this little spot or something like that, that you can still do that. So wait to cut the underarm tail until the very end and you're super happy with everything. So I'm going to show you how to weave in around the ribbing area. So I have a tail right here. We're going to actually do this tail. So I'm going to thread it through my tapestry needle. Weaving in around the ribbing area is one of the easier. So what I would do is I kind of see where I want the yarn to go. I want it to go sort of in this direction and start going down so that little bump here isn't visible on the right side of the work. So I'm going to go into this row of rib stitches. So I'm going to take my needle and going downwards, I'm going to go into that leg of the V of the first row of that ribbing and pull it through. So see how it sort of went in the direction that I wanted it to, which is good. And then I'm actually going to do that same technique through each of these. And as you can see, when you sort of pull it through, it hides really nicely in the rib. Now, how many you go through is kind of up to you. I usually like to go about halfway up just so that when I cut my tail, there's no chance of it then appearing on the right side. Okay, that's pretty good. So as you can see, that's pretty well hidden in that row. So I'm gonna just take my scissors and trim right there. And you could cut it a shorter if you'd like. I find being that this is gonna be the wrong side of the fabric and no one's gonna see it, that leaving a little tail like that is totally fine. So now I'll show you how to weave in ends in the stockinette area of the fabric. I'm actually gonna use the stripe as an example because it'll be easier to show you with the contrasting color yarn. So I'm going to thread my tapestry needle through here. Now my preferred method of doing this is using the duplicate stitch. Now the duplicate stitch is a technique where you sew your end in following the path of the stitch. So let me show you what that means. I'm going to spread open this a little bit. So you see how there is a stitch underneath these bumps that goes under this bump, and then it goes over this way, and then under this bump, and then under this bump. So to do duplicate stitch, I would first go into this bump here, then through this one. So I'm retracing this leg of a stitch. And then I'm going to go down into the next bump and then back under the original bump that we had started with. Let's do that again. So then we'd go to the next one. So you see this bump here, we're going to go this way and then this way. And then for the next one, I'm going to go through here and then back down through here. I'm just going to do a bunch of these so you can watch. Okay, so that's a decent amount. And as you can see, it hides it really well. And if we flip this over, you don't see anything on the right side of the fabric. So then I'll just go ahead and trim it up. And so that's how I'm going to do all the other ends that I have that are on the stockinette part of the fabric. So those are a few examples of how to weave in ends in your Audrey's cardigan.